Today, we're going to talk again about what happened in Kashmir. I've already done an episode about this. On the 22nd of April, there was an attack in Kashmir, which is called the Kashmir massacre, where 26 people were unalived. It's been a question ever since who committed this crime. And India doesn't want anyone to do a neutral, objective investigation. They've rejected multiple countries who've asked for this, and they claim that they know who it was. Within a few hours, Modi actually sent out a tweet implying that it had to do with their agenda against terrorism and that they would continue to fight it, implying that he knew who it was and also that it had to do with previous efforts. And this was something that I found very surprising because according to their own news websites, their security was breached, so they couldn't see this coming, even though the place where the attack happened is a highly militarized place. I read in Israeli news outlets that at times there were 700,000 people, not just people, like police forces being there just to take control over the region. So to me, it's very surprising, and it's also unbelievable that something like that could take place. I think that India downplays its control over Kashmir, and I think that they need to be honest about how much control they have. I mean, there's been times where they shut down the internet in Kashmir for 500 days, which is unprecedented in any democracy in the world. And for them then to say that there is a attack, they didn't see it coming, there was no protocol in place, it took 45 minutes for authorities to arrive, they didn't even know it was open, so there was no security in place at all. It's just very unbelievable. It doesn't sound like how they operate in that place at all. And so there's been nothing else for us but to speculate, I guess. And I've been speculating, all right? So I've presented a lot of sources to you last time, and I just want to build further upon that because I literally found the craziest things when it comes to Kashmir, when it comes to the Israeli presence there. Okay, guys. Okay, I'm going to start with the beginning, okay? Because I think what's most important right now is that there's been a ceasefire. Alhamdulillah, I'm very happy about that. I'm not sure if it's going to last, however. Last time, I've told you guys about this US-based foundation called Kashmir Awareness, who's trying to advocate for the freedom of Kashmiris. And so they actually published an article in 2019, February, that there was a military base, an Israeli military base in Kashmir. The military base it's in Srinagar. Okay, this was 2019. And so I thought that was obviously incredibly weird because Kashmir is already such a vulnerable state. It's a police state. For Israel to be there when we know how brutal they are in Palestine is something that's just very frightening. But then what happened this week or last week is that there has been a violation of the ceasefire, and guess where it took place? In Srinagar. So that's the place where the World Kashmir Awareness Forum has said that there has been a military base since 2019. I mean, there's been reports that there's a very intense cooperation between Kashmir and Israel. So like they're supposedly cooperating in other fields as well, like agriculture. But there's been reports by media outlets who say like it's very concerning for Israel to be involved in that area regardless like of what they're doing. But then for that to be a military base and then for the ceasefire to be violated in that place. And I'm going to tell you how it was violated because that's also something that makes you think like, was it actually an outside force attacking Srinagar, or was it something that was happening in Srinagar by the people who were in Srinagar? And so the ceasefire was violated by drone attacks, but there was also gunshots in this area. When I did the first episode, I was already talking about it, like how it should be unacceptable that an Israeli military base is in Kashmir. And then for now, for the ceasefire to be violated in the place where we have had an indication that a military base by Israel is already present, I mean, that's really suspicious, right? Because I've talked about how the war between India and Pakistan would benefit mostly Israel, you know, because India is its biggest client, but also because of the strategic position of Kashmir. If Israel would have access to that place, they would have, direct access to Pakistan, who they want to take away their nuclear power. They would have direct access to Iran. That would be an amazing opportunity for Israel, for them to want to violate the ceasefire. It wouldn't surprise me. And so when I heard the name Srinagar, that's where the ceasefire got violated, I was immediately like, well, surprise, surprise, let it just be the place that I read about like literally yesterday and found out that they're claiming that a military base is there. People might be wondering, like, why are these US based foundations talking about Kashmir and doing the work for them? It's because in Kashmir itself, it's not allowed to have your independent media. They had their own magazine, which was shut down after 2019. Journalists are being locked up, they're being prosecuted, they're being intimidated. So yeah, they have no choice but to rely on others to tell the news for them. Recently, I've been thinking about it. Like, I'm so worried for Kashmir because they're so vulnerable as a place, And I really do hope that there's going to be more attention towards them so that we can also, in a way, exercise pressure and protect them. Anyway, so that's the first thing I wanted to discuss with you. I mean, over the past days, I've posted about this situation and I've also shared my suspicions about Israel being involved in the Kashmir massacre. I was very surprised how some of the Muslim Indians reacted because some of them seem very determined to blame Pakistan. And I guess that might be the effect of living in a nation where you're being fed, one-sided media. Many Indian politicians have spoken straight up about that they want to implement the Israeli model in Kashmir. This is an open secret. It's not even a secret. Okay, I mean, Genocide Watch has a whole list of all these politicians and prominent people who talk like that. We all know that in India, this desire to oppress the Kashmiri people exists. And so one way of oppressing these people is by doing these false flag attacks and making sure that they can crack down on the military control even more. So for people to completely disregard that, when even in the case of Kashmir, Palestine is mentioned, Israel is mentioned by Indian politicians. There's also been a lot of I feel like very docile Indians, I'm so sorry to say this, who want to protect Israelis in this situation. And they feel a lot of loyalty, I feel, to Israel. I've seen this happen. I'm not talking about Muslims. I'm talking about regular Indians. I just want to say respect yourself because Israel has not necessarily shown respect or loyalty necessarily towards you guys. I mean, even the Israeli towns in India are not accessible to people of color. There's been this Indian vlogger, Nomad Shabam, why would you even go to Israel? And then he wasn't allowed into the establishments there either. I mean, there's this whole Israeli tribe, Bini Israel, or I don't know. I'm so sorry. I don't know how to say it. But those are Indian Jews. It's been reported by Jerusalem Strategic Tribune that they're also being discriminated in Israeli society. So even if you're Jewish and you're living in Israel, you're going to be discriminated against. I don't know why you guys have this loyalty towards them when on the surface it does look like they don't like people of color or Indians. But okay, then again, Netanyahu did name a flower after Modi in 2017. So I don't know, maybe that's where the loyalty stems from. But anyways, that's embarrassing. You guys are already, buying billions of dollars of equipment from them. I don't think you really have to let yourself get disrespected and then be docile. But that's just my opinion. Okay, anyways, we've talked about the ceasefire being violated, which is crazy in my opinion. I'm very scared for the future. But then again, I mean, if Israel is involved, anything could happen. And a violation like this would just mean a free pass to continue the war. And I hope that India and Pakistan are smarter than that and do not continue this war. That's what I hope. Anyways, guys, I have to tell you something insane. I literally came to the studio today. And I can't believe it myself. I have to tell you something crazy. Okay, look, this is insane. But Did you know that Jewish people are making claims on Kashmir? Like they actually have entire theories about why Kashmir belongs to the Jews as well, and that the Kashmiris are descendants of the 10 tribes of Israel. I cannot believe it. I'm literally quoting Jerusalem Post, which is the most read English newspaper in Israel. And then on top of that, I've also found the same information and more in the virtual Jewish library, which has been founded by the American Israeli Cooperative Enterprise. And there's I think they have 82 million visitors per year. And this is how Jewish people get educated. They basically claim that Kashmir belongs to the Jewish people as well. And they actually have a lot of similarities they feel with the Kashmiris. And they think that the Kashmiris are descendants of the 10 Israeli lost tribes. Basically, they have several reasons to believe this. The first one is they actually quote al-Biruni. And I think this is pretty painful because al-Biruni is a Muslim scholar and he's known to have traveled extensively. And he basically mentions the Jews one time in his book, al-Biruni's India. And he just says something along the lines of, on page 206 on the website of Columbia University, you can find what he said. He said, the inhabitants of Kashmir permitted certain foreigners, particularly Jews, to enter their region, but by this time such openness has ceased. That's literally all he says. And now they believe that Kashmir is also Jewish lands. Edward Sachau, he has an English translation of this book if you want to read it yourself. Like I said, you can read it on the website of Columbia University. But there's more reasons why they believe that Kashmir is Jewish lands. The Jerusalem Post also mentioned, as well as the Jewish Virtual Library, they said that as many as 250 towns and villages in Kashmir bear a resemblance to the names of places in the Holy Land. So they think that Kashmir has names which you can also find in Israel. So that would mean that in the naming of Kashmiri locations, Jews were involved. So they named those places after Israeli places. They're naming Pisgah, Mount Pisgah, Bantpur, which is, according to them, derived from Beth Peor, Nabu Hill, which, according to them, is derived from Mount Nebo in Israel, and Mamre, which is derived from the Israeli Mamre as well. I cannot. They surprise me every day. And these people surprise me every day. Okay, they also claim that the language of Kashmir, Urdu, has Hebrew words in it in the Jewish Virtual Library. They also said that Sanskrit and Hebrew have an identical nature. Then there are so many other things. They said that the Jesuit Montserrat, he said that the old inhabitants of this region were Jews by race and custom and appearance, style of dress, and manners of conducting trade. Then Francois Bernier, who was also a traveler, he said that the Jews once did live there, but they converted to Islam, which actually what they also say about Palestine, right? The Palestinians used to be Jews. But then he also mentioned that there were signs in the country which showed that the Jews were once in Kashmir, which is again the appearance according to this Jesuit. Another sign according to the Virtual Jewish Library is that the name Musa is very prevalent in Kashmir, which also made it more Jewish, I guess. The third thing was the tradition that Solomon visited this country and opened a passage for the waters by cutting the mountains of Baramule. According to them, that's very Jewish. A fourth thing that the Jewish Virtual Library propagates is that the belief that Moses died in the city of Kashmir and that his tomb is within a league of it. That's also why they believe Kashmir is Jewish. Then a fifth thing they mention is there is apparently some sign, edifice on the high hills was built by Solomon, and it's called the Throne of Solomon. that's also there. And they basically say the claim that Kashmiris are from the Israelite extraction is something that's very widespread amongst Kashmiris. I haven't met one yet. Like, I just want to ask to my Kashmiri followers, did you know about this heritage of yours that you might belong to the people of Israel? The Virtual Jewish Library also says that the internet is not deficient in web pages which share this type of history. Well, there you go, Jewish Virtual Library. I hope I help you in spreading this news. But I just want to say though, like, how crazy is this? Like, how crazy is this? Okay. I mean, I'm not just talking about the Jewish Virtual Library. I'm also talking about the Jerusalem Post. The fact that they're saying that Kashmir has like Jewish roots, honestly, it's just sickening. Because the thing is like there's already this like association between Kashmir and Palestine because of the way they're treated. Like last episode, obviously I talked about how it seems like Israel is involved. And then now, like to find out that they think they are like the original citizens of Kashmir. They named the places after places from Israel. I think it's scary and I think it's sick. There have been these Kashmiri websites who've also tried to debunk it because like they're not gonna take it, obviously. But I don't know. Are there Kashmiri people who think they belong to like Israel? Like, please come forward now or forever hold your silence because this is sick. Okay, anyways, Kashmir Life, which is this website about anything that happens in Kashmir, they've debunked it. They've mentioned many scholars, like actual historians who said this cannot be true. It has everything to do with this myth of the so-called lost tribe. Tudor Parfit, he traveled to all parts of the world, collected the material of myths surrounding the so-called lost tribes. And he's a traveler, broadcaster, and specialist in the Middle East. And he wrote a book about the lost tribes of Israel, the history of a myth, and highlighted the implications of these invented myths for modern human society. So this guy, Tudor Parfit, actually already mentioned, like, guys, stop the lies. This whole thing about the lost tribes of Israel is just really harmful. Then there's another lady. Her name is Alana Cooper of the University of Massachusetts. And she said that there's a grave danger of the Jewish diaspora theory, which has to do with this whole myth of the lost tribes. And she says that it gave birth to the Zionist state of Israel. That's what she said. And it is in the heart of Balfour Declaration of 1917. She just warns for how harmful this is. And I think that it's important for all of us to recognize that, but also to kind of like spread this, for it to be known and not for this to become like a theory that later on we'll look back and we'll be like, oh, but they've actually been saying for decades that they are the people of Kashmir. Like, I cannot even when I say it, I'm like, it sounds crazy. Like, this literally sounds crazy. Okay, but I just want everyone to know, like, I'm not trying to target Jewish people per se. I'm not saying like all Jews are against Muslims and they're just going after all of our lands. I absolutely don't want to claim that. I'm not claiming that. To be fair though, I have also found evidence that they're doing this in European places where Christians live. And so, for example, I found out a few months ago that they also have this place in Ukraine, which is called Uman. And the Guardian said that they visit there since 200 years because they make pilgrimage to these tombs there, like graves, and they will pray over it because they believe that it will atone their sins. Okay, so that's what Jewish people do. They pray to graves because they think that it will take away their sins. And so the Guardian said that they do this in Ukraine. But what's interesting is that this Ukrainian official, like someone from the government in Ukraine, actually warned against this. His name is Ilya Kiva. And he actually mentioned that when Israel loses the war with Gaza, they will have all these people who will migrate to Ukraine, taking over these lands and these places that they consider sacred, that they consider theirs because of these graves that are there, and they feel like they belong to those lands. He warned against that once the war started between Russia and Ukraine, and Ukraine has been very upset with him. They actually said he is a traitor, and he's also been assassinated. And I just want to say something that's really weird, because The Guardian also reported on his assassination. They said that we can confirm that Kiva is done. That's what Ukraine said. And such a fate will befall other traitors of Ukraine as well as the henchmen of the Putin regime. So basically, Ukraine, which is supposed to be this like crime-free democratic country, did directly threaten this guy who tried to expose these type of odd things. Let's be really honest. I thought at the time that was very weird. I'm not gonna lie. My personal stance on Ukraine is that I do think the president of Ukraine is a bit odd. I've seen videos of him like dancing, dressed as a woman on TV. I've seen him do really perverted things on TV as well, where he's like playing with his intimate parts. And I think he is not the type of person who's fit to lead a country. I don't think he's the type of person to role model good values to the next generation. And in that sense, I do have to say, I feel more aligned with Russia, who is like, they're propagating very strong family values. They're more conservative. I'm not saying that everybody needs a leader who's conservative. A lot of people, they know how to live their life. But in general, I would say that most people, they really do need strong role models in life and leaders. What I also understood is that US Aid was the one who was implementing this agenda of LGBTQ plus in Ukraine, but also funding all their media campaigns. And I don't know if you've ever read any of the Ukrainian media, but basically it's full of propaganda. When I read like the Indian articles on the war with Pakistan, I got a similar feeling. Like it was very biased. It was very emotional. They were really accusing the other party of things without being very clear about the facts that they had, the research they had done. And that's something I found very cringe. So I do want to say it's not like I've never seen these Jewish claims on territories that aren't there before. I've seen it before, like in Ukraine. I felt like people like Tucker Carlson, he was already doing a great job featuring the real situation in Ukraine and also the real situation in regard to Israel. And he received a lot of backlash for it because he actually said things which made him very sensitive to backlash. He talked a lot about the persecution of Christians, and he also doesn't like Zelensky. So yeah, immediately they would say that he's an anti-Semite because apparently Zelensky is also Jewish. That's what I got from JNS, and so which is this Jewish website, and they said that Tucker Carlson is an anti-Semite. And there's two more things I wanted to talk about because I do feel like a lot of people were being in denial when they watched my episode about the role of Israel in the Kashmir massacre. And they were saying that Jewish people, they absolutely didn't have that much of a presence in Indian society. They just came there as tourists, and that it was just like anti-Semitic behavior, they would say. But I just want to mention something. The Jewish presence in India is well established, and it's also well documented by their own news outlets. So I'm going to quote a few just to give you a good idea about what I'm talking about. So apparently Jewish people kickstarted Bollywood. Yup. They actually talk about this in their own media. And they talk about how in the earliest days of Indian cinema, men portrayed the women's roles as it was considered indecent and immoral for Hindu and Muslim females to act. Okay. And they say the Indian film industry was heavily influenced by acting of 4 Jewish people. There's 4 women. They had no confines like the Hindus and Muslims did. That's what Medium says about Bollywood. Okay. What do the other websites state? Oh yeah, here it is, the J Post again, the Jerusalem Post. I mean, honestly, the Jerusalem Post is the gift that keeps on giving, because you cannot call me anti-Semitic when I'm just quoting Jewish media. So they said Jewish stars pushed the boundaries of Indian cinema, featuring in Bollywood's first dance, first kiss, first talkie and first color film. Wow. Thank you so much for helping Bollywood become so emancipated. And I just want to say something, like I said this before, I think Bollywood has a very harmful influence on Indian society. I think they hypersexualize women while the society is pretty traditional. There's segregation between men and women, but then Bollywood makes it seem like it's normal to see a half-naked woman thrusting into a random man every 2 seconds walking on the streets. Like, that's not the reality for Indians, but I do think that this contributes to an unsafe society for women. In addition, we've seen Bollywood movies who promote stalking women, violence against women, and then packaging it as romance. Another thing I think is just like super unhealthy about the industry. It divides Muslims and Hindus. We've seen the storylines again and again. And then on top of that, I think that they perpetuate the idea that it's just European people who are beautiful, who are light-skinned, they have European features. Every Bollywood actor is like white. If they don't have light eyes, they have at least, a bit lighter hair. They're like incredibly skinny. They have like small, tender noses. I don't think that that's what the average Indian looks like. I wasn't surprised also when I saw that many of these actors came out to support the aggression against Pakistan. I don't think that the Bollywood industry is something that Muslims need to associate with, and I would advise any Muslim to stay away from that. Like, it's just not for us. And finally, I want to mention one more thing, one more connection between Jewish people and Indian society. And this one is going to be crazy. Just like Jews in the US, Jews in India also ran the banking system. They were the ones who made a lot of money off of it. They were the ones who were financing the imperialist wars of Britain in India, financing the colonizers so they could keep going. And they also have very infamous trade relations. Who am I talking about? You might wonder. I'm talking about the Sassoons, who are named the Rothschilds of the East. They were one of the most influential families India has ever seen, and they were Jewish, Baghdadi Jewish. They were super tight with Britain. They eventually even married into the Rothschild family, by the way, which is really interesting. Another thing which I think is really interesting is that they also dominated the opium trade, which was aimed at China. And I don't know if you know this, but Britain exerted a lot of control at the time to make sure they could supply China with opium, something that China obviously didn't want. But in the name of free trade, Britain pretended like it was normal that they would dump incredible amounts of opium in China. And they actually went to war twice with China over this. Can you believe that? And they did this together with who? With this Jewish banking family called the Sassoons. Am I saying it right? Sassoons. Yeah. I think this is incredibly harmful, and I think this is also very dark for them to have done this. They made their money with something so incredibly deadly. You have to understand, at the time, 25% of all men in China was addicted to opium. You know how many deaths this caused? You know how it destroyed that society? And so I'm not surprised at all that China currently isn't allying with India, because this is something that affected them for at least one entire generation. Like, one entire generation of people probably knew at least one or two or three family members who were addicted to opium. That's something that's incredibly painful. And so for this family to be involved in that, I think that's really shameful. They ended up losing their money, they say, although there's also reports that they're still worth about $100 billion. So I'm not sure. Maybe they're ashamed of this past they've had, which is very dark, obviously. But so I want to conclude it with that. Jewish people actually have been established in Indian society for a very long time, as they have been in many countries. In this case, they were very much involved in the media as well as in banking. And you can draw your own conclusions from that. So that's it for the Kashmir massacre and my own findings on why I think Israel could be involved.